Everyone wants wealth. Everyone wants fulfillment. But very few people live in a way that produces both. Some chase one and sacrifice the other. Some talk about both, but never build the discipline to experience either. Most people look for shortcuts. They ask what to do, but they never ask who they need to become. And that's the gap between what people want and what they actually experience. It's not just about strategy, it's about habit. Wealth isn't just about how much you make. It's about what you do with it, what you build, what you protect, what you multiply. And fulfillment, that's not about external rewards. It's about alignment. It's about living in a way that matches your values, your identity, your vision. It's about building a life that not only looks good, but feels right. And if you want both, if you want lasting wealth and real fulfillment, you have to build habits that create both. Not hacks, not one-time decisions, not motivational bursts of action. Habits, patterns, repetitions that turn discipline into identity and identity into results. The difference between people who consistently grow and those who constantly start over isn't talent, it's rhythm, it's structure. It's how they spend their mornings, how they think about money, how they handle pressure, how they recover when things go wrong. And most of all, it's how they choose to live even when no one is watching. Because real success is quiet. It's not loud, it's not always visible on the surface. It's hidden in how you spend your attention, how you treat your time, how you manage your mind. And when those habits are solid, when your foundations are built, you don't need to chase results. You attract them. You don't force progress. You live in a way that makes it inevitable. So many people are trying to get rich fast and find themselves broken. Spirit. Others chase purpose, but ignore the practical reality of building financial leverage. But you don't have to choose between the two. You can live in a way that creates both. But it doesn't happen by accident. It happens through pattern, through philosophy, through precision. Your habits are not just routines. They are reflections of your values. They are decisions made over and over again. And every habit you build is either pulling you closer to wealth and fulfillment or pushing you further away. There's no neutral. Your life is always being shaped either by design or by default. So this is about design, about choosing what your life will be based on how you live it every day. Not once in a while, not when you're motivated, but every single day, because it's not what you do occasionally that creates results. It's what you do consistently, and that's where your power is. It doesn't matter what your starting point is. Doesn't matter where you grew up, how much you have right now, or what mistakes you've made. What matters is that you build a way of life that moves you forward. A way of life that works, a system that you can count on. And that system, it's built from habits, not random actions, habits. And when the right habits stack up, they produce something bigger than effort. They create momentum, confidence, flow, leverage, and over time, you stop being someone who wants wealth and fulfillment. You become someone who lives it every day in the way you speak, think, choose. The first power habit is owning your time with precision. Because time is the one resource that never lies. You can fake effort, you can fake passion, you can fake your way through conversations and tasks, an image. But how you spend your time will always reveal what you truly value. And most people don't own their time. They survive it. They move through each day in reaction, answering calls they didn't plan to answer, responding to problems that weren't theirs to solve, saying yes to things that don't align, and watching their most valuable hours get swallowed up by noise. They're exhausted, but they're not effective. Busy, but not building, present, but not powerful. If you want to create lasting wealth, if you want to live a life of deep fulfillment, you have to decide that your time is not for sale, that your calendar is not a dumping ground for other people's priorities, that your focus is a sacred currency, and you're done spending it on things that do not multiply. And that starts with clarity. If you don't know where you're going, every task feels urgent. Every distraction feels reasonable. Every demand feels like a responsibility. But when you know your vision, when your goals are clear, when your purpose is anchored, everything else becomes easier to evaluate. Does this serve the mission? Yes or no? That's it. You stop asking, do I have time for this? And you start asking, is this aligned with the life I'm building? Because the people who build real wealth and deep fulfillment don't say yes because they can. They say yes because it's right, because it fits, because it's part of something bigger than the moment. So you create systems, you build structure. You don't just hope the day goes well. You engineer it. You know your priorities before the sun comes up. You block time for what matters. You batch tasks to reduce friction. You guard your focus like it's the most valuable asset you own, because it is. And you say no, not because you're rude, not because you're too busy, but because you've learned that a weak yes is more damaging. Then a strong no. You've learned that every time you say yes to something misaligned, you're saying no to your deeper priorities. Your energy is not unlimited. Your clarity is not indestructible. And the more you dilute it, the less effective you become. So you simplify, you remove the fluff. You stop worshiping busyness and start honoring productivity. You stop being impressed by full calendars and start building meaningful ones. You give yourself margin. You leave space to think, to breathe, to reflect. Because wealth is not built in panic and fulfillment is not found in overwhelm. And you track, you don't assume you're using time well. You measure, you study your patterns, you analyze how you spent your week. Not to beat yourself up, but to refine the process. To see what's working, to cut what isn't, to adjust the rhythm until it serves you. Because owning your time isn't about perfection. It's about power. It's about choosing how your minutes stack into hours and your hours stack into days. And your days build a life. It's about being able to look at a calendar and say, this reflects my values, this reflects my vision, this reflects who I've decided to become. And that ownership starts in the small things. What time you wake up, how you use the first 30 minutes of the day, what you give your attention to before your mind is fully awake, whether you begin with creation or consumption. Whether you start in reaction or direction, every habit around time tells your nervous system who's in charge. So you choose structure over sloppiness, rhythm over randomness, boundaries over burnout, not because it's trendy, not because someone said it on stage, but because you know what happens when you don't. You know what it feels like to drift through the day, to lose hours, to distraction, to run out of time before you've done what matters. And you're done living like that. Because time compounds. The way you treat today shows up in your future. Not just in your bank account, but in your health, your peace, your relationships, your reputation. Time wasted doesn't just disappear. It leaves a residue. And time well spent doesn't just pass. It leaves a legacy. So this is where the shift begins. In your awareness, in your decisions, in the way you guard the first hour and close the last one, in the way you block time for deep work instead of living in constant interruption, in the way you stop running from task to task and start moving from intention to execution. And once you live this way long enough, something changes. You no longer feel behind you, no longer feel rushed. You no longer feel like you're chasing a life that keeps moving faster than you can. Because now you're leading the day. You're choosing what gets built and your time starts multiplying. Not just in minutes, but in meaning. The second power habit is mastering the way you think about money. Because wealth isn't just built through action. It's built through mindset, through belief, through identity. And if your relationship with money is built on fear, guilt, or scarcity, it won't matter how much you earn. You'll sabotage it. You'll mismanage it. You'll push it away without realizing it. Money doesn't just follow effort. It follows alignment. The people who create lasting wealth don't just hustle harder. They see money differently. They see it as a tool, as a magnifier, as a reflection of value and a vehicle for contribution. They don't worship it, but they don't resent it either. They respect it. They partner with it. They learn how to manage it with intention. Most people inherit their money mindset from people who struggled with it. They hear phrases like, money doesn't grow on trees, or rich people are greedy, or that's too expensive, and they absorb that as truth. They grow up with unconscious associations that money is dangerous, that having too much will isolate them, that wanting it is selfish, And even when they try to build wealth, they do it with guilt, with inner conflict, with tension between what they want and what they believe they're allowed to have. So the first part of mastering your money habits is becoming aware of those stories, asking, what did I learn about money growing up? How did the people around me talk about it, handle it, react to it? What do I believe about wealth? And is it actually true? Because most people never question those beliefs. They live inside inherited limits, repeating cycles without ever choosing them consciously. Once you see the beliefs, you have the power to change them. You start replacing shame with stewardship. You start replacing guilt with gratitude. You stop thinking of wealth as something that takes, and start thinking of it as something that builds, that blesses, that creates, and that new mindset shows up in your daily habits, in the way you track, in the way you spend, in the way you invest. Not just in assets, but in yourself, in your skills, in your network, in your energy. Because wealthy people don't just grow their net worth, they grow their self-worth. And they don't treat every dollar the same. They make decisions based on value, not just cost. They budget not to restrict, but to direct. They understand that a budget isn't a prison. It's a strategy. It's a plan that tells your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. They give every dollar a job. They don't leave their financial future up to hope. They measure it, they design it. They invest regularly, not when they feel ready, not when the timing is perfect. They invest as a habit, as a pattern, because they know that wealth is built through repetition, not random action. It's built by planting seeds, not chasing windfalls, by compounding small wins over time, not by swinging for home runs once a year. They manage risk, not by avoiding it, but by understanding it. They study, they learn, they don't follow the crowd. They ask better questions. They protect what they've built, but they also position themselves to grow. Why? Because wealth is not about hoarding. It's about leverage. It's about using what you have to build something bigger than what you started with. And they give not out of guilt, not because it looks good, but because they've learned that giving multiplies everything. Gratitude expands capacity. Generosity expands flow. The more they give, the more they receive. Not always financially, but in peace, in relationships, in purpose. This isn't magic. This is mindset. This is habit. This is financial integrity. And when you build it, you stop seeing money as a source of stress and start seeing it as a source of strategy. You stop being reactive. You stop playing defense. You start playing offense. You create margin, you build a buffer. You stop living paycheck to paycheck, not because you hit the lottery, but because you stopped wasting money on things that didn't matter. You stopped trying to look rich and started deciding to be rich quietly, steadily, intentionally. And wealth begins to accumulate, not just in your account, but in your decisions, in your confidence, in your clarity. Because now you have options. You're not stuck in survival mode. You're not forced to say yes to things you hate because of financial pressure. You're no longer living behind on your own dreams. You're building from a place of purpose, from a mindset of stewardship, from a daily pattern of financial mastery that reflects who you've decided to become. You're no longer afraid to grow. You're no longer ashamed of wanting more. You're no longer apologizing for playing bigger because you've changed the story. And now that you've changed the story, the habits follow the results, follow the identity, follows. You're not just someone who wants wealth. You're someone who creates it, lives it, multiplies it. The third power habit is relentlessly protecting and multiplying your energy, because all the strategy in the world means nothing if you don't have the capacity to execute. You can have clear goals, a strong financial plan, a perfect schedule, but if your energy is scattered, depleted, or mismanaged, everything slows down, or worse, it collapses. Most people manage their money with more intention than they manage their energy. But energy is the root. Money is a resource, but energy is the engine. You use energy to make decisions, to create, to solve problems, to lead, to connect. And once your energy dips, so does the quality of everything you do. If you want lasting wealth, if you want deep fulfillment, You cannot burn out your way there. You cannot grind yourself into the ground and expect peace to rise from the ashes. You have to learn how to fuel the machine, not just run it. You have to prioritize sustainability, not just speed. And that starts with your inputs. The fuel you put in your sleep, your nutrition, your movement, your hydration, your breath. These are not luxury items. These are non-negotiables. They're foundational because your body's not separate from your goals. It is the vessel that carries them. If you sleep 4 hours a night, live on sugar and caffeine, and move once a week, don't be surprised if you're irritable, unfocused, impulsive, or exhausted. That's not weakness. That's chemistry. That's your body sounding the alarm. That's your energy bill coming due. So you stop playing games with your health. You stop pretending you'll take care of it later. You stop waiting for a crisis to create urgency. You decide, now my energy is sacred. My vitality is part of my strategy. I do not have time to crash. I cannot afford to live in fatigue. You build habits that honor your body. You sleep like it matters, because it does. You stop bragging about how late you stayed up and start protecting the hours that restore you. You give your mind space to recover, because creativity doesn't live in constant strain. It lives in rested rhythm. You eat for fuel, not just for comfort. You move every day, not just for aesthetics, but for clarity, for strength, for focus. You hydrate like your future depends on it, because it does. You breathe with intention, using the full capacity of your lungs, not shallow stress, breathing your way through every task. And you eliminate the things that drain you, not just physically, but emotionally. The conversations that suck your soul, the habits that leave you numb, the people who don't respect your boundaries. You don't have to be cruel, but you do have to be clear. If it costs your peace, your focus, your energy, it's too expensive. You stop overcommitting. You stop being available to everyone all the time. You realize that your energy is a limited resource. And if you spend it on the wrong things, you'll have nothing left for what matters. So you audit. You subtract. You simplify. You build rituals that restore you. Stillness, silence, nature, laughter, gratitude, joy, things that make you feel alive. Not just productive, because fulfillment doesn't come from accomplishment alone. It comes from being connected to yourself, to others, to something bigger than achievement. You treat your energy like a bank account. You don't just withdraw, you deposit. You schedule time to reset. You honor your recovery days. You respect your limits, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Because you know that power is not about going hard all the time. It's about knowing when to push and when to pause. And when you live this way, you stop crashing. You stop burning out every few months and calling it grinding. You stop living in a constant state of depletion and pretending it's noble. You realize that true greatness is sustainable. It's consistent. It's rooted, and your energy becomes contagious. People feel it in your focus, in your presence, in the way you walk into rooms, in the way you handle challenges. You're no longer reactive. You're intentional. You're no longer scattered. You're grounded. You're no longer stretched thin. You're anchored deep. And that energy, that overflow, that's what allows you to scale, to build wealth with consistency, to live with fulfillment instead of frustration, to multiply without crumbling, to grow without breaking, to lead without losing yourself in the process. The fourth power habit is mastering your inner dialogue, because the most important conversation you have all day is the one you have with yourself. You can build systems, you can create strategy, you can even build wealth and reach goals. But if your inner voice is full of doubt, shame, fear, or self-attack, you'll always feel like you're losing no matter what you achieve. Most people carry an inner dialogue that was shaped by criticism, rejection, failure, or disappointment. At some point, they stop needing other people to doubt them because they took over the job themselves. They turned self-correction into self-rejection. They turned reflection into rumination. They internalized every mistake, magnified every flaw, and created an identity rooted in not enough. And that voice runs on autopilot. It wakes up before you do. It whispers during stress. It screams during failure. It questions your ability every time you start something new. And if you don't take control of it, it will become the loudest influence in your life. It will override every strategy. It will drain your energy. It will kill your confidence before the world even has a chance to test it. But here's the truth. Just because it's in your head doesn't mean it's true. Just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's accurate. That voice isn't your destiny. It's your programming. And programming can be changed. The first step is awareness. You can't fix what you don't notice. You have to catch the pattern. Hear the tone. Recognize when you're bullying yourself. When you're talking to yourself in a way you'd never speak to someone you love. You have to stop letting that voice go unchecked. And then you challenge it not with empty affirmations, but with truth. Real grounded truth. You remind yourself of your progress. You speak to yourself with the same power you'd use to encourage someone else. You stop waiting to feel confident and start speaking like someone who deserves to win. This isn't about pretending everything's perfect. It's about refusing to tear yourself down when you're trying to build something. You can hold yourself accountable without calling yourself a failure. You can admit mistakes without internalizing shame. You can face your flaws without labeling yourself unworthy. And when you build this habit of speaking to yourself with clarity, strength, and grace, you shift everything. You create safety inside your own mind. And when your mind becomes a safe place, your world becomes an easier place to move through. You're no longer fighting yourself. You're no longer getting in your own way. And that frees up energy and mental bandwidth. Courage, focus, you no longer waste time second-guessing yourself or spiraling over every mistake. You don't talk yourself out of progress. You don't destroy your momentum with self-inflicted doubt. Instead, you guide yourself. You become your own coach. You become the voice that says, we keep going. That says, this doesn't define us. That says, we know who we are and we know where we're going. And that voice gets stronger every time you use it. You start catching yourself when the old dialogue shows up. And instead of obeying it, you redirect it. You don't try to silence fear, but you stop letting it lead. You don't eliminate doubt, but you learn to answer it. Not with more worry, but with movement, with action, with truth. And that becomes your new rhythm. Awareness, correction, reinforcement over and over, until the old voice isn't the default anymore. Until the story you tell yourself actually matches the vision you're building, until your self-talk becomes the fuel, not the friction. And your life starts to reflect that shift. You stop procrastinating. Not because the task got easier, but because the fear got quieter. You start showing up more confidently. Not because you suddenly became perfect, but because you stopped attacking yourself for being human. You build stronger relationships, not because you changed the world, but because you changed the way you speak to yourself. This habit is invisible, but it's foundational. It underpins every other habit. Because your life is filtered through your beliefs, and those beliefs are shaped by repetition. And if the dominant repetition in your life is self-judgment, you will build a life that reflects that judgment. But if the dominant rhythm becomes self-leadership, you build a life that reflects power. So speak power, speak vision, speak truth. Train the voice in your head to match the life you're building. And when you do that consistently daily, without apology, you don't just change the way you think, you change the way you live. The fifth power habit is building an unshakable bias for action. Because without action, all clarity, all mindset, all structure means nothing. You can read the books, you can write the goals, you can map out the routines, but if you're not moving, you're stuck. If you're not acting, you're stalling. And stalling doesn't feel like danger until you look up and realize a year has passed and nothing changed. Most people don't struggle because they don't know what to do. They struggle because they don't do what they know. They hesitate. They wait. They let fear steal time. They overthink. They overplan. They want every detail to be perfect before they make the first move. But life doesn't reward thought. It rewards motion. You don't become confident by thinking. You become confident by doing. You don't build momentum by planning. You build it by moving. You don't find your rhythm by waiting. You find it by starting, even if it's messy, even if you're unsure, even if you don't feel ready, especially if you don't feel ready. Because readiness is not a feeling, it's a decision. It's the choice to act before the fear disappears. It's the commitment to progress over perfection. It's the decision to live like your future depends on what you do right now, because it does. And the people who build wealth and fulfillment, they don't wait for motivation. They've built systems for action. They've made movement a non-negotiable. They don't always know exactly what to do, but they do something. They start, they experiment, they adjust, they repeat, they let action become the teacher. That's the power of bias. It's the default. When in doubt, move. When unsure, move. When tired, move. Not recklessly, not blindly, but with intention, with awareness, with the understanding that clarity is often on the other side of motion, not the prerequisite for it. This doesn't mean speed for the sake of speed. It doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It means shortening the distance between idea and execution, between inspiration and implementation, between thought and traction. It means creating a rhythm where action isn't you hype yourself up for. It's something you live in. And this habit, it removes so many barriers. It kills procrastination. It silences overthinking. It neutralizes fear. Not because fear disappears, but because action makes you stronger than it. Every time you take a step through fear, you remind yourself that fear is not a wall. It's a curtain, thin, temporary. And once you push through it, it loses power. You start building evidence. You prove to yourself that you are the kind of person who takes action. That you don't need to feel perfect to make progress. That you don't need permission to move forward. That the act of doing is where growth lives. You learn faster. You fail better. You build momentum. Not all at once, but in waves, in streaks, in reps. And the more reps you get, the easier it becomes. The hesitation shrinks, the excuses fade. The resistance weakens, and what once felt heavy starts to feel automatic, because action creates flow. It creates clarity. It reveals the next step. You stop sitting on the sidelines waiting for the full staircase. You just step on the next stone. You move, and that movement builds trust with yourself, with your team, with the people watching, wondering if you're really going to show up. And showing up, that's the habit. Not once in a while, not only when things are easy, but daily in discomfort, in doubt, in imperfection. Because the more you show up, the more you become the person who shows up. And that identity, that's where the magic lives. You stop being the person who wants to start a business. You become a builder. You stop being the person who wants to get in shape. You become someone who moves. You stop being the person who has potential and become someone who produces, who delivers, who builds, and none of that is random. It's not luck. It's not timing. It's repetition. Reps of action, reps of courage, reps of doing the thing, even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unclear. Because the longer you wait, the harder it gets. But the more you act, the easier everything becomes. So make movement your default. Not just when you're ready, but when you're scared, when you're tired, when you failed, when the voices in your head tell you to wait, you move anyway, because that's the habit. That's the standard. That's how momentum is born and how it's kept. The sixth power habit is mastering how you respond to setbacks. Because no matter how good your plan is, how clear your vision is, how strong your discipline is, life will hit back. You will get knocked down. You will face delay, rejection, loss, disappointment. It's not personal. It's not a sign that you're broken. It's part of the process. And what separates the people who live in wealth and fulfillment from the people who stay stuck in survival isn't the absence of struggle. It's their response to it. The people who thrive don't escape adversity. They're just trained to respond to it differently. Most people hit a wall and assume it means stop. They experience failure and let it define them. They let one no plant the seed of doubt. That grows into hesitation. They hit resistance and take it personally. They internalize it. They quit, and not because they're weak, but because they were never taught that pain is part of progress. The people who build real resilience, they expect resistance. They understand that breakdowns are part of breakthroughs. They've trained themselves to feel pain but not surrender to it. They take the hit, but they don't stay down. They regroup, they refocus, they return stronger. And this response, it's not a feeling, it's a habit. It's a muscle. It's trained over time. You don't wait until the storm comes to figure out how to lead through it. You decide now. When setbacks hit, I rise. When disappointment shows up, I reset. When plans change, I adapt. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this building in me? You shift from victim to student, from shame to structure, from fear to focus. Because everything that happens can either define you or develop you. You get to choose. You stop making setbacks personal. Just because you failed doesn't mean you are a failure. Just because something broke doesn't mean you are broken. Just because someone left doesn't mean you're unworthy. Setbacks are data signals, lessons. And if you can stay in the lesson long enough, you grow. You learn how to zoom out to see the bigger picture. You realize that one bad week doesn't erase a year of growth. That one rejection doesn't erase your potential. That one failure doesn't erase your identity. You stop shrinking every problem into your personality, and you build a process for returning, a way to reset, a way to come back. Maybe that's journaling, movement, prayer, coaching, whatever your rhythm is. You build it before the fall comes, so that when it does, you don't rely on willpower, you rely on your system. You get good at letting go, at releasing things you can't control, at not gripping so tight that you break your own momentum. You stop needing everything to be perfect before you keep going. You get comfortable with mess, with motion, with moving forward. Even if it's not all figured out yet, this is how you stop quitting. You stop making setbacks mean something that they don't. You stop turning a delay into a detour. You stop letting short-term emotions drive long-term decisions. You feel it, but you don't fold. You slow down, but you don't stop. And this habit of resilience, of recommitment, of recovery, it builds something deeper than momentum. It builds belief because every time you return, you prove to yourself that you're not defined by the hit. You are defined by the response, and your identity gets stronger. Not because you avoided failure, but because you kept moving through it. And people will start to notice not when you win, but when you keep coming back, when you get better instead of bitter, when you grow instead of quit. And you'll start to notice too, you'll realize that the same things that used to knock you out for weeks now barely last a day, that what used to feel like the end is now just part of the rhythm. That resilience isn't something you try, it's something you live. So you stop waiting to never fall. You start getting better at rising. You stop needing the road to be smooth. You just get better at walking. And that habit of rising, of returning, of recommitting to the vision, no matter how many times it cracks, that's the habit that builds lives. That last, the seventh power habit. It is protecting your environment with intention and intensity. Because no matter how strong your mindset is, no matter how sharp your habits are, if you stay in an environment that contradicts your values, you will eventually be pulled back into alignment with your surroundings. Your environment is more than where you live. It's what you see, what you hear, who you spend time with, what you allow in your space. It's the mood of your home, the energy of your relationships, the atmosphere of your conversations. And if you don't guard it, it will shape you slowly, subtly, completely. Most people underestimate the influence of their surroundings. They think they can build a powerful life in a toxic space. They think they can create peace while constantly surrounded by noise. They think they can pursue clarity while tolerating chaos. But the two are incompatible. You don't just rise to your goals, you fall to the level of your environment. If your environment makes it easier to distract yourself than to focus, you'll default to distraction if your environment makes it normal to complain, to compare, to settle, you will absorb that even if you're trying to push against it. So you become obsessive about what you allow in your space. Not paranoid, but protective, because you know that you are a product of your surroundings. And if you want different results, you create a different atmosphere. That means auditing your relationships. Who speaks into your life? Who gets access to your mind, your emotions, your decisions? Not everyone should have that access. Not everyone is qualified to speak to your future. And the longer you keep people around who are committed to who you used to be, the harder it is to become who you're meant to be. It doesn't mean cutting everyone off. It means elevating the standard, having real conversations, protecting your peace, choosing who you walk with based on where you're going, not just where you've been. You protect your mental environment. You stop feeding your mind garbage. You stop consuming endless negativity. You stop letting your thoughts be shaped by random noise. You start curating what goes in, because what goes in comes out. You read things that sharpen you. You listen to voices that call you higher. You fill your space with sound, art, ideas, and language that reflect your next level. You make it easier to believe in growth than to sit in fear. You make expansion normal, and physically you create order. You clear the clutter. You clean the desk. You organize your space in a way that supports your clarity. Because physical clutter becomes mental friction. And when your space is messy, your mind mirrors it. That doesn't mean perfection. It means structure. It means flow. It means designing your space to serve your focus, not sabotage it. Because the more effort it takes to do the right thing, the less likely you are to do it. So you design the path of least resistance to match your goals. And when you do this, when you shift your environment with intentionality, your habits become easier. Your energy becomes stronger. Your momentum becomes automatic because now the world around you supports what you're trying to build. Your home becomes a place of peace, not pressure. Your schedule reflects your priorities, not everyone else's. Your circle reflects your values, not just your history, and you wake up every day in an atmosphere that reminds you of your vision. People will ask you how you stay consistent, how you stay so clear, how you seem to move with so much calm power, and they'll think it's your willpower, but it's not. It's your environment. It's the standards you've set and enforced. It's the space you've built that reflects who you've decided to become. And that space becomes a container for growth, a launch pad, a place where your next level isn't something you force, it's something you flow into. Because the cues are aligned, the energy is aligned, the relationships are aligned. You stop tolerating environments that drain you. You stop apologizing for needing quiet, for needing structure, for needing time to think, to build, to move with focus. You stop shrinking it to fit into rooms that were never meant to hold your future. You elevate quietly, consistently. And when your environment rises to match your intention, you stop having to fight so hard to move forward. You've removed the anchors. You've cut the noise. You've created a space where wealth and fulfillment are no longer things you chase, but things you breathe. The eighth power habit is living with values over feelings. Because if you only do what you feel like doing, you'll live in circles. You'll start strong and fade fast. You'll build momentum, then sabotage it. You'll ride waves of excitement and crash. The moment pressure shows up, and that is the cycle most people live in, chasing consistency, but always losing it to emotion. Feelings are real. They matter, but they are not a stable foundation for action. They change. They fluctuate. They're impacted by sleep, food, mood, weather, conversation. And if your decisions are constantly shaped by your emotions, you'll never build anything stable. You'll always be at the mercy of the moment. Values are different. They don't change every day. They don't shift based on mood. They anchor you. They give you a reference point. When your mind gets noisy, they remind you what matters, especially when everything around you feels uncertain. This habit is simple but not easy. It's about doing what's right, even when it's not convenient, saying what needs to be said, even when your voice shakes, showing up, when it would be easier to check out, holding the line when you'd rather lower the bar, choosing long-term alignment over short-term comfort, And it starts with defining your values, not just the ones you like, the sound of the ones you're willing to live, the ones you're willing to suffer for, because that's how you know something is a real value. It's not what you say when things are easy. It's what you still choose when wins are hard. Maybe your values are discipline, honesty, growth, service, courage, peace, faith, contribution, whatever they are. You name them, you write them, you commit to them, and then you filter your decisions through them. Not your preferences, not your feelings, not your comfort, your values, because when you lead with values, you don't need to rely on motivation. You don't need to hype yourself up. You have a compass, a standard, a why that's stronger than the excuse. You move from principle, and that movement is powerful. You build habits that reflect those values. You shape your schedule around them. You correct course. When you stray from them, you don't just post about integrity, you live it. You don't just talk about self-respect. You practice it by following through. You don't just talk about gratitude. You show it in how you give, how you lead, how you treat people. This is how fulfillment is built, not from comfort, but from congruence, from knowing that the way you live matches what you believe, that your effort reflects your intention, that your choices tell the truth about your character, and it transforms how you feel. Because ironically, when you stop chasing feelings and start living by values, your emotions become more stable. You trust yourself more, you regret less, you spiral less. You build a sense of internal peace, not because life is easy, but because you know who you are. You stop waking up and asking, do I feel like doing this? You wake up and ask, what does my highest self expect of me today? And then you do that, not perfectly, but consistently, because you've stopped being a slave to the weather inside your head. You've become the one who decides how the day unfolds. This is the path to lasting power. You stop making temporary choices. You stop needing constant reward. You stop living like a thermostat that rises and falls with your surroundings. You become a furnace. You set the tone. You carry the fire. People start trusting you, not because you're loud, but because you're grounded, not because you're charismatic, but because you're consistent. They know what to expect from you because you know what to expect from yourself. That stability, that trust, that's wealth, that's impact, that's legacy. And it's not built in grand moments. It's built in the quiet ones, in the moments when no one sees. When you say not today to the excuse, when you say yes to the hard thing, when you say, I will. Even when everything in you wants to pull back because you've chosen to lead. Not with emotion, but with identity. Not with hype, but with values. Not with ease, but with conviction. And that choice, that habit, that pattern of choosing, the harder right over the easier wrong, that's what makes you unstoppable. You don't need more motivation. You don't need another breakthrough. You don't need someone to come save you, rescue you, or hand you a better opportunity. What you need is to decide that the life you want, the wealth, the fulfillment, the peace, the power is something you're willing to build and build daily. Because the secret isn't in the noise. It's not in the hacks. It's not in the rare moments of inspiration. It's in the pattern, the rhythm, the quiet, often invisible, relentless execution of habits that move you forward. The 8 power habits you've now learned. They're not magic. They're not exclusive. They're available, but they only change your life if you live them. Owning your time with precision, managing your money with purpose, protecting your energy, mastering your inner dialogue, taking consistent immediate action, responding to setbacks with strength, curating your environment, living with values over feelings. These are not boxes to check. They are standards to rise into anchors, to return to lenses, to see your life through. Especially when things feel chaotic, because life will test you. You will get distracted. You will have days where you slip, where you forget, where you feel off. That's not failure. That's human. But the difference between the people who build something powerful and the ones who don't, the powerful ones return, They remember, they reset, they refuse to stay down. This isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about resilience. It's about taking full ownership of what you can control. And when you do that, when you stop waiting for the perfect time, stop looking for outside permission, and start living these habits from the inside out, you start creating something different, something rare, something real. You start attracting opportunities that match your discipline. You start building relationships that match your identity. You start making decisions that reflect your future, not just your past. And that gap, the one that used to feel impossible to cross between who you were and who you're becoming, starts to close. Not overnight, but brick by brick, day by day, habit by habit. And before you know it, people start asking you how you did it, how you became so focused, how you stopped breaking promises to yourself, how you started showing up with so much clarity, confidence, and consistency. And you won't say it was easy. You'll say it was earned. Earned through the early mornings. You didn't want to show up through the quiet decisions to say no to comfort, through the discipline to keep moving even when it didn't look like it was working, through the commitment to the process, long after the emotion wore off. Because this life you're building, it's not random. It's not accidental. It's the result of who you chose to become and what you trained yourself to do. It's the fruit of the habits you planted and the seeds you kept watering, even when it would have been easier to give up. So you keep going, you keep rising. You keep leading, not from pressure, but from vision. Not from panic, but from identity. Not from force, but from flow. Because you've built the habits that hold you. And now your habits are building the life you always knew was possible.